It's our second.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry to interrupt the conversation. It's 10 o'clock. I thought we could get started. Yes, staff, committee members, good morning. Let's give this a go. So everyone's probably had a chance to take a look at the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Kevin, thank you. Rob, great. Any questions, concerns? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, motion carries. Great. On to item 3 is the adoption of minutes from July 27th. I believe everyone's probably had a chance to take a look. Can you get a motion to adopt the minutes, please, for July 27th? Thank you, Ken. Kevin, perfect. Questions or concerns? Hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, motion carries. Great. There's no presentation or delegation, so we'll go on to 6.1, which is the reports. Mr. Neal.
Great, thank you. We got 4 reports for the committee today, so we'll move through these in a timely fashion to keep us on schedule and on time. First one is 6.1. This is an update to the zoning bylaw with respect to waste management. This is a bit of a gap in our zoning bylaw that we're looking to resolve. And our senior planner, Mitch Coombe, will provide an introduction, and we will be happy to take questions during or after the presentation, but we're looking for the committee's input on these zoning bylaw changes. So over to you, Mitch.
Perfect. Now I got my best friend here. This is good. So for our team, myself, obviously, Mitch Coombe, senior planner, Jacob Lazowski in community planning is the planner, and then obviously Heather Cower, our director. So I'm going to jump right into the presentation here. So I'm going to start off with our purpose and context. I'm going to work into the discussion and next steps. And then as usual, I'm going to finish up with the recommendation. So the purpose of today's presentation is to present the proposed waste management zoning bylaw amendments to DTAC committee members for feedback. So staff have undertaken a 3-stage planning process, and in stage 1, we start off with our background research and analysis. Here we identified issues and solutions. We received input internally on those, and then we developed options for potential amendments based on that feedback. In stage 2, we drafted amendments, and we had those reviewed internally by staff, and now we're out presenting those to a couple committees, DTAC being one of those. And then finally, we're going to present these amendments to council for their consideration and hopefully adoption. So just to give the committee a little bit of feedback, City of Abbotsford operates within the Fraser Valley Regional District's solid waste management plan. And our city is reliant on private industry to operate the collection and temporary storage of all major waste streams within the city. Our staff have realized that our zoning bylaw does not adequately regulate the waste management industry. And so staff are proposing some zoning bylaw amendments that will provide clear direction through regulation by things such as definitions, adding permitted uses in appropriate zones, and then having conditions of use to help with compliance. So now I'd like to unpack how our waste management industry is currently regulated under our zoning bylaw. So currently we have automobile recycling and salvage yard, and in that, this is where we deal with automobiles and parts, and we also deal with used building materials for some reason. We have recycling depot, which accepts recyclables, but we have no uses within zones that accept garbage and construction or demolition waste. And we only have one site-specific location that accepts compostables. So after conducting research and looking into best practices across BC and Western Canada, we were able to look at what would be a waste management system that would allow for 4 permitted uses within our zoning bylaw. And this would be in line with best practices. So we'd have motor vehicle recycling and salvage yard, and that would deal with just motor vehicles and parts. Waste transfer station, this would be new, and this would deal with recyclables, compostables, garbage, and waste from construction and demolition sources on a temporary basis, as it's stuff that's not an end destination. Then we have commercial composting facility, which would deal with our curbside compostables, and recycling depot, which would deal with recyclables. So now I'm going to get into the details of some of the amendments that we're proposing. And the first one would be a change of name from automobile recycling and salvage yard to motor vehicle recycling and salvage yard. And the reason for the name change is that it's more indicative of the types of things that are accepted within these types of facilities. And then we're also, within the definition, taking out used building materials, as that's more appropriate somewhere else. Yeah.
Would that include RVs and boats and motorcycles?
Yeah, motor vehicles, yes, yeah, so anything that, would fit within that, yeah, so like motorbikes, whatever, those types of things, yeah, good question. Yeah. So, motor vehicle recycling and salvage yard would exist within our two zones here. We've got I2 and I3. We're not proposing any changes of use or conditions of use within I2. What we are adding is one condition of use within I3, which would be to prevent the discharge of leachate. Now, waste transfer station, this is the new permitted use and definition. And so this would provide some much needed regulation within the waste management industry within Abbotsford. And this would provide a lot of clarity and direction to the industry. So we're proposing waste transfer station as a permitted use within I2 and I3. And within I2, the main thing is that it would be contained within a building. And other conditions of use would be that you need an impermeable surface or roof or cover. Waste would be transported with watertight containers. Operators would need to be compliant with all city bylaws, as well as have an emission control plan in place for odors and particulates, and also prevent the discharge of leachate. So in I3, the difference here is that it can be outside, but once again, well, it has to be on an impermeable surface with a roof or cover so that there's some protection from rain and elements. Would require solid fencing around the site. Waste would have to be transported in watertight containers. Only able to store wood, metal, and plastic outside. Operators would once again have to be compliant with all city bylaws, have an emission control plan in place for odors and particulates, and also prevent the discharge of leachate. Now, for commercial,
Sorry,
through the chair.
is this all new?
Yes,
There's no existing partial?
waste
Conditions.
transfer station, we do not have that within our current zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
So commercial composting facility, we're not proposing any changes to the definition here. But what we are proposing to change is to add this use within high impact industrial I3 zone. We're not going to make any changes to our one site specific permitted use in A2, so that would continue. But the conditions of use for I3, what we're proposing here to help these operate would be have an impermeable surface, a roof or cover to prevent water from entering curing areas, have a leachate collection system, that would be a requirement, prevent the discharge of leachate, and then operators would also have to have an emission control plan in place for odors and particulates. So for recycling depot, what we're looking at here is changing the definition to be more in line with the processes and activities that take place in a recycling depot as per best practices around the province, rather than a list of the materials. These already exist with existing uses within I2 and I3, so we're not making any changes there. But what we are proposing is a couple conditions of use both within I2 and I3. First one would be not to include the intentional breaking of glass products. So if you're at the recycling depot and you drop a glass bottle, we're not going to worry about it. This is for large, volumes. And then also, we don't want to have the including of storing of used tires. The tire industry takes care of that. So then we have three definitions that we're adding here. Recyclables, this is where we list the materials. And then we have two other definitions, organic material, leachate, that's provided with just clarity and direction. And so our next steps would be that obviously finish off our presentation today and receive any feedback. We'd like to move on to council for consideration and hopefully adoption. And so I'm going to end off the presentation with a recommendation that the committee generally support the draft waste management zoning bylaw amendments as presented. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Mitch. Is anybody prepared to make that motion and then we can have some discussion? Perfect, thank you, Rob. First, second, Ken, thank you. Questions and or concerns for Mitch?
I have a question. Why no glass break?
If I can through the chair, the reason being, if you get into large-scale glass breaking, that's more processing. So that would be something that would happen at a processing factory. So this is just recyclable. So if you're on a weekend and you're taking your bottles there, it's just to give them there, and then they'll move that somewhere else. So it's just a temporary, it's a depot, not an actual process. Yeah, transfer is the role there, yes.
Question. There's been a story in the news up in Columbia Valley of a recycling company recycling compostables, which has caused quite a stir up in Columbia Valley in the Fraser Valley Regional District. So this would help prevent something like that situation where someone just leases a piece of land on ALR and starts recycling tons and tons of compostables. Is that what this would, so someone would have to have the correct zoning to be able to do that and follow all these procedures with impermeable surfaces, covered area, collect the leachate, control the odors, all that stuff?
If I can through the chair, I mean, we have a few different definitions. So we have other types of composting, like mushroom composting, and that's dealt with, you know, they have their own set of rules. This would be for curbside, and yes, they would have to be within an I3 area and follow all those rules.
And how do you define an odor control program? Like, that's a hard one to define, because odor to some people might not be, right? Like, hog farmers probably don't realize that their pigs smell. So you could have very different definitions, right, of that. Is that like, are there anything that you can draw from? Like, is there like a area based? Is there a particular base? Or how do you actually control an odor plan?
If I can through the chair, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but our solid waste management folks, and through environment, there are certain standards that need to be followed. I'm not aware of the specifics of that, but there are rules in place and standards.
So they would have to follow certain standards?
Yes,
if
correct.
there's, okay.
Yeah.
That are applicable to that industry?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
I believe Ted, yes, online.
Yeah, thank you. So from what I understand, there are no waste transfer stations that exist currently in the city of Abbotsford, is that right?
If I can through the chair, within our zoning bylaw, they do not exist. So we have waste transfer stations that have legal non-conforming status, but we're just trying to actually put this within our zoning bylaw so that we have rules and regulations for everyone to operate under.
Okay, so the existing ones, what will they now be forced to follow some regulations they don't currently meet?
So if I can through the chair, we have ones that have legal non-conforming status, and through this, we'd like to help these transfer stations help them on the path of compliance towards following, you know, all of these rules that would be in place to help them, help the, you know, kind of their neighbors around them, and just in general environmental conditions and so forth.
Okay, so there is a strategy in place then.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Any other questions for Mitch, online or in person?
I guess it would be a question. Construction waste right now, if you go down to Huntington or Riverside, whoever that is, that GFL?
Yes.
Down there?
Yeah.
Construction waste means you're dumping a bin or a dump trailer in one pile. That's what you may be paying for something different, but it all goes in one pile unless it's just wood or just drywall.
Yeah.
Is there any intentions to have any separation between construction waste? Like the definition of it?
If I can through the chair, I mean, obviously, you can have wood and other things stored outside, but there's certain products that can't be stored outside. So, you know, depending on if you're zoned I2 or I3, that would kind of delineate the difference there, right? So if you're I2, you have to be all indoors, so then that's a different scenario. If you're I3, then you have to have a cover, right? So anything that's not wood or what the other materials that I listed would have to be under cover, right? So for instance, like drywall, you know, they have certain conditions there where that would be under cover and so forth, right? Just because if it gets wet, then it's just hard to manage.
So companies like Super Save or Maple Leaf, on a lot of our projects, will just dump everything in the bin except for drywall. And then they take it somewhere and sort it. And then they give us a waste diversion tracking that we can track the different materials.
Okay.
This wouldn't have any bearing on that, right? No. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Online? Okay, great. Hearing none, can I get some, I'll call the question. Is everybody in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mitch. All right, next item is item 6.2. This is an update to our building permit process review. The committee may recall over the past few years, we undertook a building permit process review and we've started the implementation process of that under Trevor's leadership. And so we're here today to provide the team or the committee with an update on that process. And Trevor will walk us through the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here to give an update on the modernization of the building permit process. Before getting to some of the details, we thought it'd be worthwhile just taking a quick step back to go back over a little bit of the timeline and kind of how have we gotten to where we are today. So in about mid-2020, through a council strategic priority, we launched a building permit process review where we engaged the services of Alan Nielsen Strategies to help us go through that process. So through that process and the review with Alan, we were able to identify a number of opportunities and came up with the building permit process review report and modernization strategy that came forward in 2022. As well at that time, through funding from the UBCM Local Government Approvals Program, we were also able to launch and kick off our digital development delivery project, or more easily said, our D3 project. As we've worked through the D3 project, we've been able to implement phases 1 and 3, which we'll touch on today, and are currently in the process of implementing phase 2 at this point in time. Through the building permit process and the D3 project, we have now updated our building permit approval process to be standardized across all building permit types. And we've seen that broken down into 4 separate stages for our building permit process. Our first stage in the building permit approval or the building permit process is our administrative processing. So that's when we're taking in the building permit through our administrative teams and then doing a cursory check to make sure the application has everything we need to do our comprehensive review, as well as to identify to the customer if there's any additional external approvals that might be needed in order to approve the building permit. From there, we go into stage 2, where we have our internal coordination and referrals. So this is where we're forwarding the permit off to the other areas within City Hall, such as parks, engineering, in order to have those folks in those areas start to review the permit application so we can coordinate that review. As well, we also conduct our detailed review at this point in time. From there, the permit, of course, goes towards permit issuance in our lovely happy scenario, and then towards our on-site inspections of the construction project. And then the final stage is the permit closure, where we have off-site final inspections conducted, as well as the refund of the security deposits. In addition to restructuring the building permit approval process and the building permit process itself, we've also developed and implemented through the initial phases of the D3 project, online customer-centric specific resources. So we've built out and developed specific journeys for our individual customer types that we have. So obviously we've got a wide range of folks, from people building 6-story complex buildings to doing home renovations. So created a unique experience for them to support our different customers in putting together their permit applications and preparing for a successful application. As part of that, we've also done individual building permit application guides that, again, try to help inform and let customers know of everything that they will need in order to have a successful building permit application. Once those customers have submitted their building permit applications, We've also further developed and enhanced online tracking tools for their building permits where they can go to our website and check and see. It is a bit rudimentary, but it allows them to at least see if their plan review has commenced for their building permit project, if the application review has been completed, as well to see what other areas within City Hall are currently reviewing or have completed the review of their building permits. Customers can even drill down a little bit closer onto these tracking software to see where is the application or who is it with. So in this example here, we can see an in-process start of a review happened, and then we identified additional information was needed. But then the customer provided that additional information back to us. So we now know that's staying with us, and the customer is able to track and see that resubmission has come back to us. So allowing that customer to have greater visibility of where their application is and whose court that the application is at that specific time. As we've restructured the approval process, we've also split our plan review team into 4 separate teams. And we've built that out through our renovation and alterations team for residential homes, our new and addition to residential homes, and a tenant improvement team, and a new construction addition to complex buildings. And for each one of those teams, through council, we've adopted targeted turnaround times that we measure from a median processing time. So from when a building permit application is made at our front counter to the time that application receives its first comprehensive review, these are the targets that we have for our processing times. With all of the different teams that we have and all the improvements that we've been doing throughout the city, we've actually seen a significant improvement, I believe, in our building permit review turnaround time. So this is our targeted processing times that we have. I think most notably, and the one that stands out the most to myself, is when we're looking at October of 2022, where we were at a 23-week median processing time from the end date of the application to that first review. We're now, from our last reporting cycle in August, we were down to 6 weeks for that review time. So a week off of that target there. And it's also actually interesting as we're watching this as well, we can start to see reactions to things that are happening too. So you'll see with our single family or our residential homes, new and additions, back in March and April, we'd actually hit our targets for those 2 months where we were at a 5-week turnaround. I think as many people in this room probably know, on May 1st, we had the energy step code for Abbotsford go from step 1 up to step 3. So we saw a surge of applications, and we saw the result of that surge of applications where we went back up to 7 weeks, and we're seeing that number starting to come back down as we're pushing through those additional applications. As we're moving forward into phase 2 of the D3 project, we're very excited about our next steps that we're currently actively working on. One of which is our mobile inspection. So this is something I think we've heard from our customers for a while, is an eagerness to have digital inspections and have our inspectors being able to email out inspection reports. So we are working on that currently, and we're looking to implement that early winter of this year. With that, you'll have emailed PDF reports sent out to the permit holders as well as certain registered professionals on the project. So for example, if there's an architect who's the CRP of a project, they'll be able to have that report emailed directly to them, hopefully reducing the number of touch points for distribution of field reviews from our inspectors and providing as much widely readily available information as possible. The other advantage to this as well is these reports will be able to be issued right out in the field prior to our inspectors coming back to the office and having to enter results into the system. As well, because of the software technology that we're using, it allows us the opportunity to also have preloaded comments into the system. So our inspectors can actually take that from a pick list. So our hope is instead of the inspectors trying to write their comments out in short form as quick as possible, we can provide more wholesome comments back on our reviews as well. So hopefully providing better clarity back on our reports to builders in the community. And that'd be early winter, we look to have that rolled out, and we're looking to have some communication go out in advance of that, just so the builders are aware of when that is coming. In addition to the online or the digital inspections, we're also actively working right now on implementing the Citizen Portal. And the Citizen Portal will be the online application form for building permit applications. So what it will allow is for customers to be able to apply for building permit applications 24/7 through the online platform, which would be directly integrated into our back-end Amanda software. So the customers are making that application directly to us. And I can show you guys a couple of the screenshots of what we're currently mocking up and going through. Basically, the Citizen Portal is a step-by-step process to which customers are able to make their application, from going through and selecting their certain permit type, and then to go adding details, selecting the property that's going to be at, filling any additional information we might need for the project, and then going to a document upload, where the portal itself will be able to assist the customer in identifying which drawings or documents are required for that permit application, giving them the ability to upload them before proceeding on in the process. So the customer will have the opportunity, if the document is applicable to that project, to upload it, and if it's not, they'll be able to make a declaration that it's not applicable to their project. A good example of that might be if you're submitting an application for an addition or a renovation, and the system's saying, hey, you need structural engineer drawings, you'd be able to tick a box and say, no, I declare that I don't need a structural engineer. I've done this all under Part 9. I won't need to submit that document. But it allows us to check the documents as they're coming in and then put it directly into our system. Customers will also have the ability to manage through the portal and through their online credential login. They'll have the ability to manage multiple applications, come back and revisit them. So if you're in the process of uploading documents and you're looking at it and, oh, wait, that structural engineer didn't send me their digital drawings, I need to go contact them to have those send them back. You can leave that application, come back to it in a couple of days and re-upload those drawings, and then proceed forward in that application.
Internet incomplete. Does that mean they're not done the process?
Through the chair, yes, for that one. So this is just some examples of what we've got so far. We haven't worked out quite all the details, but that's one of the things that we're looking at as a potential status to identify that if the customer has started their application, but they've stopped through the process, it's a way for us to track it in our system. Because once the customer enters it into the portal, it'll show on our back end as well. What we've heard from a lot of other communities is they'll have folks submit those applications and leave them and do nothing with them. So we might have to build some logic in the background that if that application is left, say, for 30 or 60 days, it removes that application completely and no longer has it seen there as active. But still allows the opportunity for the customer, if you don't have everything to upload at that time, okay, I can leave it, I'll come back next week and I'll upload my items and then be able to go forward.
And you can see the trends of what's in the queue.
Correct. Yes, we would be able to, yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, you have the opportunity to manage multiple files as you're going through. Initially it will be just with building permits, but if you have multiple building projects you have ongoing throughout the city, you'll be able to track all of the approvals through the Citizen Portal there. Happy to answer any questions.
Perfect, Trevor. Thank you so much for your report. All the great work. I would love to hear from the community members, just some feedback, positive or negative, on the report. Steps going forward. Yeah, please, Rob.
Trevor, that's a great step in the right direction. That's thank you for all your hard work on that. So if everything is going digital, I would then assume that the plan checkers would be reviewing all the documents digitally in a PDF viewer and marking them up in a PDF editor and saving those documents, and then those documents would get returned to the applicant as a marked up PDF with the stamps on it, the comments, add the smoke detector, make sure your rise and run is correct, all that stuff. So the applicant would then also be working in PDF digital formats moving forward. So there's no more bag somewhere behind the fireplace with all the documents stuffed in there. I should be able to walk on a job site and there's a nice big 29-inch screen with all the documents there.
Through the chair, up to you if you want to put a 20-inch screen on the site. Might get damaged a bit.
Yeah.
But yes, the intent is to have that back and forth through a digital environment. So our plan reviewers will be reviewing all of the building permit applications on a digital platform, going through, marking them up. We're still working out the appropriate mechanisms on how that back and forth works. It might be to start that we're still drafting our plan review emails and it's coming back versus marking and uploading the drawings. Through the technology pieces, I'll be frank, it's a little bit cumbersome with the upload and download and the editing of documents right now. We see longer term opportunities to be able to do further enhancements to make that back and forth and that review a little bit more collaborative. But our first step is to try and at least, and targeting, I don't know if I know it was on a slide, I don't know if I emphasized it though, but in the first quarter of next year is to implement the online applications. So we can at least start getting them in digitally, we can start reviewing it, and then look to build upon that as well to try and make that review a little bit more collaborative. So it might be a bit of back and forth with emails still to start, but we're looking for ways to make that review as collaborative as possible.
And then, like I can just see the data storage going crazy. You're gonna have to open up a whole floor just about server room here. Because then, like, all your digital field reviews will also be linked to that permit application. So, or is that just basically an email out? It's not really then saved under their application where they could go later and see all 10 memos.
Through the chair, at this point right now, well, the data storage, we're working hand in hand with our partners in IT on that. So they're already well in advance in forecasting of what the potential needs of that are going to be. As far as field reviews, inspection, things such as that, they're all still within the same system. On the back end, on the front end, we're going to have it primarily isolated just to the permit approval at this point in time.
Okay.
There is future opportunity for us to have inspections booked through the citizen portal. We've even thought about when we have consultants on projects to have the engineers be able to upload their documents into the portal versus picking up a piece of paper on site. It's that first step right now, just getting it up and running. We know our inspection booking online right now is working for the most part. We don't want to really pull that right out while it's working. We want to manage that change and adjustments and improvements as we implement them.
One more little question as I'm processing this. So there will be, once this is fully implemented, there is no more paper applications for mom and pop doing a little addition. They will have to create digital copies of everything and apply online.
Through the chair, we don't want to isolate anybody out, and we don't want to create barriers to anybody achieving building permits. One of the opportunities that we've got with this is, while our back end work will be all digital, we have that ability to provide that as a service on the front end. That if a customer is still coming to our counter with hard copy drawings, we can digitize that for them on their behalf. But yeah, we don't want to stop anybody from coming.
No, you want them to apply for a permit.
Exactly. We want them to come in. We want to address the public safety in buildings, so that's a key part for us. So we're looking at how we want to manage that as well as we're rolling out and mapping all of this out of what it's going to look like is how will those permits come in the front counter now? How will we digitize them? And what are the steps there? So we're working through those details now. But on the back end for the staff of the plan reviewers, they'll all work on the same platform. Because part of our concern was, are you looking at the monitor on one drawing, pulling for one drawing, and then pulling the drawings out on one? We want them standardized, keeping that production line going so we can turn around permits quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Ted, online, I believe you had a question?
Yep, thank you. Well, Trevor, it sounds like a wonderful program. Sounds like it should speed things up considerably. I'm just wondering, on site, will there be any requirement to have actual physical marked up signed copy of any documents?
Through the chair, to start, yes. So what we've been looking at is we're shifting to the mobile inspections. We will have the ability to view the drawings on the tablets, but there are limitations to that. So to start, we will be looking for builders to still have printed drawings online. So the thought being is once your building permit is ready, the builder would be able to go back to the portal, download their approved permit drawings and have them printed to have them available on site. But there are various challenges, everything from tablet size and ability to actually read the drawings for the inspectors on site to some areas of the city we aren't able to get network connection, so we're not able to access the drawings when we're out in the field. And then some of it's also just with those drawings, those file sizes can be just enormous. So being able to actually download it onto the tablet while you're in the field, the technology is not 100% of the way there for us to do that yet. But I think that would be our long-term goal to be able to have that. So I'd say to start, we'll still need drawings on site, unfortunately.
No, I think it's a good thing because I think everyone should really be shouldn't have any excuses as to be able to access the most current marked up set, any of the trades, so that everyone's on the same page and isn't kind of left behind because their technology doesn't work that day.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ted. Any other questions from you? Okay, if not, Ken, go ahead.
Just a question as you're talking about everything going digital here, and I think you guys have done a ton of work, and it's great to see the progress on this so far. Are you doing any kind of testing right now with these systems, like even if it's with other builders or contractors or architects or whomever? Like, is there like a test period right now that you're trying to run this software through just to kind of work some of the kinks out before you kind of get to the hard implementation date of this?
Through the chair, so each the online permits and the online inspections we're running them almost as independent projects as we're going forward. For the mobile inspections, we've reached out to a lot of our partners that are already using this software. So we're relying a lot on them for that, and then trying to work out a lot of the challenges that we might have internally with it, as well as going through a fairly robust internal testing program. For the external, primarily, I think the one to be most impactful to the customers for the online building permit portal. Through that, it won't be necessarily a hard launch on that. We know that it'll be more of a soft launch and a slow uptake of that for customers. I think our anticipation is we're gonna have a lot of customers still coming to our front counter because that's what they're used to, they're comfortable with. And the first few that do start going through the online portal will be almost our test cases, but the ones that will prove out that it works. And even with the citizen portal, we're also learning through our consultants that we also have engaged on some of the best practices from other communities. So we're actually meeting, I believe not this week, the following week, with a counterpart down in Bellevue, Washington, to find out about their experiences that they've learned, the feedback that they've gotten from their customers and their fields of what have been some of the successes they have, some of the things they wish they could have adjusted, and incorporating that into what we're building.
Okay. In terms of what you've implemented so far, like the whole building permit intake right now, or like the way that you can track all the building permits, how you outlined, like going through it myself, it's actually been very helpful and nice and refreshing. Just kind of wondering, like, how do you measure the success of what you've implemented there? Like, obviously you've noticed like an increase in productivity. But is there a way that you've been able to kind of measure, like we've been able to like cut down our building permit wait times by X amount of weeks? But like, is there a way to kind of quantify that, like to like measure the efficiency in that?
Through the chair, so the primary ways that we measure our performance, really, one is that median processing time. That's a key metric for us because we know that's a target that's important on a variety of levels. We also look at what our intake versus our output is. So taking a look at how many permits we're taking in, how much construction value are we issuing out, how many residential units are we issuing out, as well as how many permits are we measuring out. So we're using those as our primary metrics. We try to solicit for as much feedback as possible of that more anecdotal experience of, I went through this journey, this is how it went. I know I try to connect with Steve now and then as well through the CHBA. I know he reaches out to me as well when he's hearing from members if there's concerns. So we're definitely trying to be very open and receptive to any feedback, whether positive or negative, on the implementations of the improvements we're trying to put out there.
Yeah, like I would say on my end, I've noticed a big improvement on how it's worked for us and other builders. I'm just kind of curious, like, it sounds like you guys have noticed a big improvement too. Just wondering, yeah, how great that's been. So it's good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. Any other questions online or in person? No? Okay. Mark, Ron, you okay? Kevin, you all right?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a topic that we could go on all day. It's exciting.
Perfect. Thank you, Trevor. Thanks for all your hard work.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. Next is item 6.3, development application process review. So we just heard of the implementation and some of the digitization of the building permit process. Well, that started with a building permit process review, and that was undertaken by Alan Nielsen. And so he's back. We brought him back. He's helping us now with a development application process review, all with the mindset of being more efficient and effective in our development application processes review and to make that application process the best experience possible for our customers. And that's our mindset in going into this process. So today here, Alan's here to introduce the project to you. And there's opportunities certainly for comments and a few key questions at the end of this that Alan will pose to the group. So we're looking for an interactive and conversation here today on our development application process review. With Alan is Sherry Hurst, who's helping Alan with his work as well. So I'll turn it over to Alan and he'll walk us through the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. I'm very happy to be here with my colleague, Sherry Hurst. As Mark mentioned, we are doing the development app approval process review for the city. And so I'm going to take us through some slides just to introduce what it is we're doing, but and to emphasize a point that Mark made earlier, and that is that we are hoping to get some feedback from the committee. We'll share some of the feedback that we've heard thus far, but we're hoping to get some additional thoughts from the committee and whatever the committee wishes to provide by way of input. So we've got really kind of just a four-part purpose of our presentation. One is, and I've covered most of it already, one is to introduce what it is we're doing to DTI-8C. I don't know if there's a better way to say that, but
DTIAC.
DTIAC, okay, there we go, thank you. And we'll talk about our approach, we'll share some of our findings, and then to understand the issues that the committee may have as well. Our assignment really consists of two key parts. One is to examine the processes in place that the city uses to receive applications for development, to assess those, to approve broad range of development applications, everything from rezoning to development permit, development variance permit, subdivision, OCP amendment, those kinds of things, those major kinds of applications that come in for development. We heard from Trevor earlier about all the work that's gone on in building, and as Mark mentioned, I had been involved with Trevor's group looking at some of the similar issues to this study from a building permit process perspective earlier. And so we're not focused on building permit applications in this study, we're focused on all of the other ones that make up development services. We also want to identify then the barriers that we may need to address, the barriers that are kind of slowing things down, perhaps that are creating a less than perfect experience for applicants, for customers of the city. How do we find ways to improve on that? How do we find ways to streamline? Because we know that time is money when we're dealing with development. We want certainty, our customers want certainty. We want to make that as quick and as streamlined as possible. The study is driven by challenges that everybody is facing, including Abbotsford. We know about these, we've experienced these in our various lines of work as we interact with local government. These are challenges on kind of finding the right staff, on dealing with technology changes, on dealing with increased regulatory requirements, either at the municipal level or at the provincial level, and how to bring those into our system. But we've also here got a strong kind of culture at the city. The city does have a strong culture of looking at its business processes and finding ways to improve those, reduce timelines, make the customer experience better. We see that with the building permit process. We see it in a number of different processes that the city has been systematically reviewing over the number of years now. Our approach consists of 6 different stages. Have kind of begin, which we've done already, of course, and that's where we kind of look at what's in place currently. We explain that, we understand the scope of what it is. We introduce our project to various groups, such as this group, for example. The next is to assess, and so we examine what's in place. We identify some of the issues. We engage with different stakeholder groups, including staff, and I'll get to that in a moment. The next one is when we compare. That's where we do some comparative research. We look for best practices across industry. We look for best practices, and when I say industry, I mean kind of the municipal sector. We look what some of our colleagues in other places are doing, primarily in British Columbia, but also outside of British Columbia. What can we learn from examples elsewhere, incorporate into Abbotsford's processes and its overall development services function? We'll then draft our report and we'll look at some specific options for improvement. And we will then come back to this group and to others to share some of those ideas in a draft form. We'll talk to a council's committee as well, council committee of the whole as well, and kind of share some of those findings in draft form and see kind of what seems to resonate with folks and how we can improve on some of those options as well. And then finally, we'll report out to council at the end of this calendar year. I highlight these two ones here, the assess and compare, because it kind of talks about where we are right now. So we're pretty much leaving the assess bit, and we're kind of well into the compare, and we're getting to the point now where we're going to start to want to draft some options and put together a draft report. I talked earlier about sharing when we come back with some of those options, so we'll be sharing with this group, DTAC, with some other council committees, with industry, UDI, CHBA, and others, and then prior to going to council. I talked earlier about engagement. We do want to, and we are reaching out and have reached out to a number of different parties, city staff being very key, of course. So we've talked to, I think, pretty much every staff member who touches an application at the city. That's, as you can imagine, a city the size of Abbotsford with a number of applications, that's quite a few people. So we've had different focus groups of staff. We've met one-on-one with key staff in different positions, and we've understood what some of their challenges are, what some of their ideas are, what some of their thoughts are going forward on how to work better with the development community and how to address some of the concerns that may arise in our conversations with customers of the city. Council and Committee of the Whole, we briefed Council earlier on what it is we were doing. We'll be coming back to Committee of the Whole to share some of our findings and our options and getting some feedback from Committee of the Whole prior to going to Council ultimately at the end of the year. The committees, so we've got two particular that we are presenting to and getting feedback from or input from. DTAC, this one, and then BIPAC, the Business Improvement, thank you, and PAC. So yes, I always say Abbotsford wins the gold medal for the acronyms. Right? Nobody can remember them.
Committee, probably committee.
Committee. Okay, we're gonna go with committee. Yes, yes.
Try not to encourage.
Sorry.
Try not to encourage.
Yes. Industry, UDI key there, but also talking to home builders and talking to NAOP as well. I think it's development group. So, and then of course our applicants and so our customers. We've reached out. We've had individual interviews with about 10 or 11, maybe up to 12 now, members of the development community. We're reaching out to others to get a more robust group. So we've reached out. Some folks are very busy, of course, and others just feel that maybe they're happy with what's going on. Some, for whatever reason, we haven't been able to connect with yet, but we're being persistent, and so we're hoping to broaden that list beyond 12 and get up to as many as 20 if we can, because we do really want to hear from people who go through the system. I talked about the check-in team. We've got an internal project team, so Mark and his colleagues at the city, a number of key people, Blake in development services and development planning being part of that. And so we've got a project team in place. We have a council. We'll be going to October to council and to the project team with some ideas. Our committees will be back in November, and then, as I mentioned, council in December. I'm going to ask my colleague Sherry to come up and talk about, or stand up, whichever you prefer. And
I don't know how it works for people online if I don't.
Oh yes, you may have to be here then. Good thinking. Okay. So we're going to, these are some of our findings. They're a little bit more than preliminary findings. They're informed primarily by our discussions with customers, but also through our consultation with staff. So Sherry's going to do the first set, and then I'll kind of finish with a few others.
Thank you, Alan. So yeah, I'll just touch on some of the things that we've been hearing and some of the things we're starting to think about how we can include them in options for streamlining. Bill 26, some of you may know that about 2 years ago, Bill 26, there was some legislation brought in that changed the opportunities, one being that rezonings that are consistent with the OCP, the applications don't have to go through public hearings. So we have that option to explore. And in that legislation as well, they also changed the ability to have staff be delegated the authority for minor variances that would otherwise have gone to council or in some cases the Board of Variance. So those are opportunities that exist now because of the changes in the legislation. So we're looking at those. A pre-application phase. Right now, the City of Abbotsford has what they call a DIM, or a Development Inquiry Meeting. They have about 400 to 500 of those every year. So we're looking at maybe opportunities to sort of tease out or separate some of those processes, because those include everything from a fairly easy inquiry that sort of more like a counter inquiry. And we are looking at, the city is already looking at technology that can provide some easier access to some property information. So to help people do some self-service there where they might not need some of those DIMs. But then on the other end of those, we're looking at maybe formalizing a pre-application process where applicants can submit their concepts and have staff review those, attend those meetings, and provide that really valuable initial input that helps out the applicants. So having that as a more formalized pre-application phase that maybe also has a fee attached to it, that then would be credited back when you make your application. So just again, trying to pull apart that so we're not lumping all those same types of inquiries into that one process that uses up quite a bit of staff time. Submission of application, what's required when, really that's more about clarifying for applicants the entire list of types of reports that might be required as part of their application. So being transparent and upfront about what those reports are and when they might be required, what the triggers are, so people understand when in the process they might be needed. And on top of that, having terms of reference for each of those types of reports, and even having templates. So those can be, make it as easy as possible for the consultants and professionals that are preparing those reports, but then also making it easier for staff who have to review them and are pulling out, making sure they're complete and pulling out the recommendations from those reports. Review streams, so we're looking at, and this is kind of similar to what Trevor brought up for the building permits, so they've got their own streams, but so doing something similar for the planning department, probably based on complexity, so you have processes that might apply to more minor or simpler applications versus some of the more complex applications. So you don't have necessarily your two-lot split going through the same process as your 200-unit development. So you might have a more streamlined process for those two different streams. The DART, Development Application Review Team, for those familiar with the internal processes at the City of Abbotsford, DART is a team that brings together representatives from all the departments that have input into a planning application. By and large, this is quite a successful model. Actually, other municipalities have emulated it. But we've also heard that it's not quite working as well as it initially was or as well as intended. It does provide an opportunity for everyone to comment on an application at one time. It provides a deadline. People can discuss the issues for that process, but it's becoming a bit of a backlog. We have a lot of applications that have to funnel through that process. And so one of the things we're maybe looking at is ways to make sure it's being effective and maybe even not all applications have to go through that process. Works and services, timing of requests, that's something that we've heard from the development community quite a bit, is wanting some consistency around when works and services are required. The City of Abbotsford has a slightly different process than some other municipalities in that they have a development agreement that comes into play at rezoning stage that asks for, it usually deals primarily with off-site services. And then later in the process, you need a works and services agreement. And so different things are asked for at that time, which is fine. It's just more of a clarifying what's asked for when and trying to make sure that we're not asking for something twice that they have to then redo. If they need to provide some civil drawings at development agreement stage, that they then refine and have to change again at building permit, just making sure that we're not duplicating any efforts for our applicants. And lastly, the role of the file manager. Well, lastly, Alan will speak to a few extras as well, but role of the file manager, we've heard quite a bit about, right now you have a file manager both in the development engineering as well as on the planning side. And on the one hand, they're collecting all the input from all the different departments, and then they usually sort of compile all of that and are sharing that with the applicant. And so that's one of their roles, but is there an opportunity for them, instead of just passing it on, to be going through accepting all that input and applying some more of their judgment to, because sometimes there's some competing requests in there, sometimes something needs priority, and really given their file manager's understanding of the entire project, applying some judgment to make sure that what they're passing on to the applicant really makes sense, and using that authority to then use some judgment there. So looking at really what that role of the file manager is.
Thanks, Sherry.
Yep.
And just before we go to the last few, which I'll just switch a slide for, kind of an overarching comment, and that is when we look at all of these, and we'll get to the next ones and they fall into the same category, when we look at all these, what we're really kind of identifying are challenges, whether potential, real, perceived, to the smooth flowing of applications through the system. So where can we, and I talked earlier about identifying different barriers, again, either real or perceived, how can we kind of look at each of these as a possible impediment or potential impediment to that smooth flowing and change it around, adjust it so that we, or in some cases even eliminate it so that we make sure that things flow very smoothly. When we look at referrals, that's another key topic that we hear in many municipalities, because as folks will hear will know that when an application comes in, it's important for the city because it's made up of different professionals and different types in different departments of the city. It's important for the planning department to receive it and to say, we need to reach out to our colleagues in development engineering, in environment, in parks perhaps, and have them look at this particular application and apply their judgment as it relates to specific issues that may affect their or the city's works and services, the environment that the city has been charged with protecting in different ways, and the city's parks, both current and future. And so we do look at referrals, and one of the things that we find is often the case is that referrals tend to take a little bit longer than expected in some places and maybe not as long in others. And we want to make sure of a couple of things. One, that folks who are reviewing these these applications, who are in the referral department reviewing the applications, are very focused on what it is they're looking at and what it is they're not looking at. And also that there are clear timelines on getting feedback back to the planning department. So as Sherry mentioned, the file manager can then assemble that information, look for contradictions, look for compromises where necessary, and move that along through the process. Trevor talked a lot about technology as what they're doing in the building department, and we're really kind of looking to Trevor's group as a little bit of kind of the bar that now we're going to need to meet. And because we're all kind of moving in that direction of looking at different ways to harness technology, looking at the new applications through file management software that are coming into the city, that the city's developing in some cases in-house, so that we can make sure we're tracking developments very quickly, we're making it easier for people in different departments to be looking at developments, and most importantly, we're making it easy for customers to find out where their applications are through the system and to provide that information to us in wherever possible through an online system. Communications, very important, of course, because one of the things with development applications, and one of the things, if I can presume to say from the development sector that's important, is certainty when we look at applications, when we look at these types of processes. Good communication between file managers and applicants, customers, is a very effective tool at increasing that certainty and making it easier for customers to go through the system. And then finally, flexibility, solutions, approaches, communications, I should say just on that point, what we're hearing from the development community is that there are many examples of good communication and there are a number of examples of not so good communication. So we want to make sure that the city has the tools in place, the expectations, and the consistency in communicating with customers. And then flexibility, solutions, approaches, again, like communications, good examples of flexible, solution-oriented approaches that staff at different levels are using. Some examples where, and perhaps because of maybe lack of experience in certain staffing areas, where we're just not getting the same kind of flexibility that the city we wish to have. So what can we do from the city's perspective to empower, to educate, to encourage staff at all levels to find ways to get to the solutions? So those are the types of findings we're hearing from the development sector. We're hearing in many cases from staff as well that we're now exploring alternatives and options around, and that we'll be coming back in our report to the city and I suppose to the broader community, as it were, the development community, with some proposals going forward. Mark mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Chair, that we did have a few questions, and I don't want to kind of necessarily say, and I'll leave this up to you, Mr. Chair, to manage, but we don't have to follow these questions, but we've thrown these out as a way to kind of prompt some thinking and to get some feedback or some input from committee members. But of course, we're more than happy to take any questions committee members may have, or to take any feedback, even if it doesn't align with these questions.
No, Chair, yeah, and thank you for the presentation. I think it's a good way to start unless
Perfect.
the committee members say otherwise.
Yeah,
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Please.
sure. Particularly good. And I don't think it's just in development. The development is, also following the same process where there's a lot of different factors that are being taken into account, whether it's diking, transportation, parks, garbage, whatever it might be, where we have an applicant coming in or particular staff members we can get stuck with their blinders on.
Yeah.
I've always been impressed how broad a particular topic gets spread amongst the city for contribution.
That's great. Okay, good. So that's a good thing.
That's a good, the first question was particularly good.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so that's good.
Okay. Are there other, I don't mean to preempt your chairing of the meeting, but just in the spirit of efficiency, maybe I can just throw it out then to the whole group. If there are other thoughts in dealings with the city on development issues, is there something that stands out as particularly good about Abbotsford? Or conversely, are there things that you've experienced or heard from others where there needs to be some kind of some attention given?
The attention towards time for processing is more important than ever. It's costing more than ever to sit on a property, waiting for any of the processes to go through, whether it's from development, building, or building itself, and the cost of construction. So I would say time is the biggest factor and costs that come with it.
Yes. And exactly, and as you mentioned, Kevin, the costs that come with that, the carrying costs, the interest, especially in a high interest environment, can be pretty prohibitive the longer it takes, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, Ken?
Another comment that I would have, would just be kind of the communication within, not only just kind of within the development department, but all the other departments that are affiliated with that. Like you say, like you might go to the development department there, but you have all these other bodies that have to be involved. And so I think communication, not only just from the client to the development department, but within all the other bodies that are involved, is probably an area that I think could get improved upon. I think it can get improved everywhere, but I think that's a huge piece because that kind of ties into time, like Kevin was saying, right? If that piece is lacking there, it's taking more time and therefore costing more to get an application through.
Well, thank you for that.
Putting my Chamber of Commerce today, right? Yes, make sure you get that on. I know we have discussions at the Chamber, obviously we're very broad in business types. The development applications, all the processes are very important for businesses that are, heritage companies that have been here a long time, but also new businesses attracting new business into our community.
Yes.
And if they can see some certainty on approval processes, whether it's requirements or time, it can help their path forwards towards our community.
And through the chair, if I may, just in response to that point, I think that's an excellent point. And at our previous discussion we had with industry group, we had somebody from the city's economic development group here, and I was really happy to see that because, to your point, the ability or streamlined, efficient processes that provide a high degree of certainty to development has implications for economic development, has the ability to draw investment into the city. That didn't always used to be the case. If we go back 20 years, it wasn't kind of always, there was always the link to it, but it wasn't as strong a link. But now when we look at just the cost of development, we look at the time it takes in different jurisdictions, and we look at also the choices that the development industry and the people who are purchasing land to develop have in different areas, we're seeing now that there's a real competitive advantage to those municipalities that can demonstrate certainty, that provide certainty in the development environment. And so I think it's a really important point to highlight. Thank you for that.
One more, but I can, other people can
Okay, I'll break it up for a second.
Yeah, okay, sure.
I think I want to expand on Ken's comment a bit. I think the communication and it is critical. Ken kind of touched on Abbotsford communication, but I've never made a development application myself, but I could just imagine that if you apply and there's outside bodies that also have to comment, whether it's ALC or Fisheries or Transport Canada or someone external, that all of a sudden, like I hear horror stories of all of a sudden there's an application that's been held up at ALC and nobody actually even knew about it.
Yeah.
And you're waiting for the ALC to meet next, October, and the whole thing comes to a grinding halt.
Yeah.
So I think somehow being some kind of process similar to the building permit process where you can see where it's at, that people can log in and see where the holdups are. Okay, I'm waiting till October for the next ALC
Yes.
committee meeting before, maybe it goes back to the City of Abbotsford department. I think that would be very helpful, and I'm sure you're working on some kind of portal like that, or recommending something
Yes.
like that.
Absolutely, through the chair, if I may, thank you for that. I think that it is, and it can be challenging, as Mark will attest, from the city's perspective, to always be kind of holding the external bodies to account. That said, some things the city can do with, there's that kind of constant communication to those external parties and informing customers, informing applicants of kind of where things are and what to expect. And Sherry mentioned in her words, the pre-application meetings or the DIM meetings that are held right now at the city. And some of the changes kind of to looking at those, or some of the refinements maybe at those meetings, having city staff who are monitoring how long agriculture commission meetings or the ALC meetings are taking, how long, what to expect from Fraser Health on different matters and so forth. Bringing all of that to the fore very early in the process so that applicants know when we go into this process, there's going to be a time at which this leaves our hands and goes to these provincial bodies. We don't have a lot of control over that, but you need to understand that what we're hearing is that it could take up to 2 months to look there or a month here, that kind of thing. So the more communication, the more information I think is going to be really critical, and the earlier in the process. So applicants who are arranging financing, who are looking at trades, all that kind of stuff, know what to expect.
And setting expectations as
Setting
well
expectations.
for the applicant. I kind of see it at the
Yeah.
building permit stage
Yeah.
where, people think they're gonna be flipping burgers next month.
Yes.
I just shake my head, it's like, maybe a year from now,
Yes.
but it just takes longer because
Yes.
for the first time applicants, whether it's building or development, they just don't know the processes that they need to get their ducks in a row, so that it makes it easier for city staff to process that stuff.
Yes, and if I may, through the chair, that's a very good point. And earlier in comments, I think on Trevor's presentation, Rob, you made the distinction between kind of the developers and the mom and pops, if I can use that term. And I think that's important to kind of always recognize that there are going to be some very sophisticated, experienced developers who understand what to expect and who have kind of, crafted their and organized their end of the things to kind of meet those expectations. We want to be very clear on those expectations and always try to improve upon them, but communicate them clearly. But to your point, I think where we have applicants who are less experienced and maybe it's the first time they're doing something, they may have no idea what to expect. And so that early communication of expectations is critical.
Any other questions, Rob? Great, thank you. Ted, online.
Yeah, thank you. Alan, I'm just wondering, where does consultation fit into all this? And when it comes to communication, there's also communication with the citizenry, especially when you're dealing with large-scale development where there's big change, can be impactful to others, and that can eat all kinds of time. So I'm wondering how do you address that?
Yes, thank you very much. And through the chair, one of the things Sherry mentioned in her opening comment or her comments on reviewing some of the issues dealt with the ability under Bill 26 to change the approach to public hearings and so forth. And so folks may kind of think, well, public hearings is kind of an important part of that opportunity for the public to come and provide feedback on a proposed development. And that's the case, but we also want to ensure that if changes are made to that opportunity, there are other opportunities earlier in the development process so that an applicant has the expectation that the city expects that development, or the applicant to be communicating with the public, with the community, particularly on larger, more impactful developments. And the city is working with the applicant to make sure that they get in front of the community, because the earlier, again, that we can kind of get feedback from the community through that consultation, the easier it will be both on the community, but also on the applicant. So having those conversations earlier, if we need to have new tools to kind of provide those opportunities, then that's one thing we'll be looking at to kind of insert into the process. But also just for existing tools, making sure that they're robust enough to provide for that meaningful consultation as early as possible in the process.
Yeah, great, that makes sense. That'll save you some problems in the back end.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you, Ted. Any other questions online? Okay, Ken, please, go ahead.
Maybe this is just a side note to the Bill 26, but like other than Bill 26, like are there other options that you guys have as a municipality to implement that kind of help streamline the process, or like does that bill even help you guys out when it comes to development approvals and reviews?
Yeah, if I can, through the chair. So Bill 26 really addressed two issues, or two items. One is public hearings, the ability to waive a public hearing with the intent of providing efficiency and consistency for the development application process, and Alan spoke to that. The other piece was minor development variance permit applications. We now have the ability to delegate that variance process to staff. Before, council was the only body that could vary a bylaw, the zoning bylaw, for a setback, for height, or whatever it may be. Bill 26 now gave that delegation authority, so council can delegate that to a staff member now. So right now, for instance, development permits could be delegated to staff, and it has been. So our staff, the director, Blake, issues development permits. Through Bill 26, council can now make that delegate the development variance permit process to the director as well. So we'll be looking at that on following Alan's recommendations and his report by the end of the year. So Bill 26, those two items in Bill 26 are two items that we definitely will be looking at in 2024.
Okay, so nothing has been, you haven't been utilizing that right now currently?
Not yet, no.
And if I may add, just, Mr. Chair, just to Mark's comments, he identified that the city now has the ability to delegate, and has delegated, council has delegated authority over the approval of development permits. And kudos to Abbotsford for that. There are a number of cities that don't do that. Some do, but a number of cities don't do that. And so that kind of, again, is one potential impediment or to a streamlined process. So Abbotsford's made very good use of that authority thus far.
Thank you. Kevin, did you have a
I guess just a question or comment. The recent provincial housing targets that were released, that would be related to process. It'd be more just a factor of the volume rather than the improvements that are happening. Would that be a fair assessment?
Maybe
Sorry.
if I can, Alan,
Absolutely.
through the chair, yes. So there was an announcement about housing targets this week, and Abbotsford was on that list with a target of 7,240 units over the next 5 years. So that's an increase in units for us. So yes, it is a volume piece, but attached to that volume, of course, is the efficiency and uptake of applications and being able to process those applications. So we have a mindset of trying to achieve those targets, and our processes is a component of that we can control to assist in ensuring those units do get built. So yes, process is a component of those housing targets. Yeah,
To address the volume.
exactly. Yeah.
And if I could, through the chair, those housing targets, which Abbotsford is now under, and as are a number of other municipalities, they do also, I think, really just, and it goes back a little bit to that kind of economic development angle that we talked about, and has a bit of a twist on it. It really provides that broader context for what it is we're doing now. It kind of provides that sense of urgency a little bit, and that impetus, that broader impetus for this kind of initiative. So, and it's telling, I think, that Abbotsford kind of, had commenced this initiative prior to having the province come down with housing targets as well. So again, good for the city on that level too. So, and with its other initiatives such as in building. So there is this sense, I think, that yes, the volume coming through that needs to come through, the desire to attract investment to Abbotsford, the desire to ensure that customers of the city receive the best or have the best experience. All of those things kind of speak to that context that is driving there, or within which this initiative is occurring.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions online or in person? Hearing none. Oh,
Can I
sorry.
just make one comment to the committee? So thank you for your comments. We really do appreciate it. We want as much feedback and input to this process as we possibly can. Recognizing in the committee meeting, there's staff in the room, you may have additional comments that you may not want to share in this environment, and I can understand that and appreciate that. If you would rather have a conversation privately with Alan, I think Alan would be very open to that. So Alan, if you're okay, maybe we could provide the committee your email address, and if you want to reach out directly to Alan, feel free. Alan is the keeper of all the comments. Staff isn't aware of who made what comment, and his report will not specify where those comments are coming from. So, and that's intended to, for the integrity of the process and for those providing input. But I would encourage you to reach out to Alan directly if you have additional comments.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So no recommendation, Sherry or Alan, thank you so much.
Thank you,
We're looking
Mr.
forward to
Chair.
seeing your
Thank you.
recommendations. Thank you. Rob, you want to?
Sure, I'll introduce Aaron Gonzalez, senior manager. What's your title?
Senior Energy and Climate Action Manager. I'm still new.
Going over sustainability report in the 2022 Climate Action Office.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm still fairly new to the city. I just started in January, so I'm still getting to know you. So thank you for having me this morning, and I'm happy to give an update on our sustainability report and the climate action update. So just a few items to share today with you related to Abbotsford's progress reducing greenhouse gas emissions and carbon pollution, and highlighting the climate action work through two recent reports, the Local Government Climate Action Program and the city's sustainability report. So briefly, the city's climate action path is guided by leadership at several levels. Internationally, we have the Paris Agreement. Nationally, through the Pan-Canadian Framework for Clean Growth. Green Buildings Framework and 2019 Green Fleet Strategy guide carbon pollution reductions for civic buildings and for fleet. Just a quick expansion on the Green Buildings Framework, as it's a really great recent example of corporate action and policy providing community leadership. The framework was the product of extensive collaboration and engagement with subject matter experts externally and internally to ensure it met city-specific needs and can be practically applied to new city buildings or major renovations. This Made in Abbotsford change management tool does not burden the capital projects unnecessarily, but rather it's embedded in the existing building funding, design, and construction processes. Implementation of this and other plans and strategies is ongoing, and today's presentation provides highlights of this work. So just a brief moment to establish some common terminology on climate action. On the left, climate mitigation refers to actions that reduce fossil fuel use and carbon pollution that's responsible for our increasing global temperatures. And we can address transportation, buildings, and energy supply through energy efficiency measures and cleaner energy sources. On the right, climate adaptation actions manage the risk associated with climate change impacts to ensure resilient communities. Many of these initiatives support healthy ecosystems, self-sufficiency, and vulnerable populations. Where the two overlap, we see synergies where actions are mutually supportive of both sides of climate action and can also provide co-benefits to the community. This lens is also known as low carbon resilience. So moving on to our city's corporate energy and climate action program. This table you see is a summary of the emissions for 2022 and compares our performance to our 2007 baseline. Just bringing your attention to the bottom of the table, in terms of our total emissions, we've seen a significant 17% reduction and are just 3% shy of our 20% OCP target, which is really an achievement we're celebrating. Despite a small increase in the building sector, the Green Fleet strategy has driven large decreases in fleet emissions and significant and sustained reductions in public works and contracted emissions have contributed to this overall success. Contracted emissions have seen an increase this past year due to a return to somewhat normal operations after COVID-19 and increased snow removal services due to the extreme winter conditions. An expanded version of this table is found in attachment A of your package. So now moving to the Community Energy and Climate Action Program. Despite challenges in the provincial data availability to monitor community GHG profile, Abbotsford does continue to make significant progress through a number of carbon pollution reduction initiatives, addressing the key mitigation sectors of land use, transportation, buildings, and solid waste. So highlights of this include the official community plan's land use policies and embedded tools, enhancements to the city's active transportation network, EV charging requirements for all new residential buildings, engaging with local builders and designers through education and training sessions that promote high carbon and high performance buildings, and fully automated curbside collection services to over 26,000 single family homes and duplexes. Some highlights of upcoming community-facing initiatives, including priority actions found in the 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. The official community plan update is a priority under the Inclusive and Connected Community Principle, and Council will be considering the scope of this project in late 2023. Next, the city's first climate resilient strategy, which is also a priority under the Sustainable and Safe City Principle. This will build on existing work addressing climate change impacts. Project scoping is currently underway with broader project launch in early 2024. The Montrose Transit Exchange supports the inclusive and connected community principle and the goal of capitalizing on transportation opportunities throughout the city. Detailed design is complete. Construction begins this fall and completion is slated for summer of 2024. And finally, the residential retrofit program will support residents in reducing their carbon footprint and decarbonizing existing homes. Phase 2 of this project is underway with completion slated for early 2024. So just changing gears to the 2022 Local Government Climate Action Program, or LGCAP. This marks the second year of the provincial program where the city received approximately $450,000 for climate action initiatives. This year's survey included questions on climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, and city spending to support these areas. The completed survey report is found in attachment C. Moving on finally to the sustainability report. Since 2017, this has been a staff initiative to highlight the city's environmental sustainability commitments by presenting key city actions and organized under 6 categories. This year's report covers 2 years of progress, and I'll be walking you through some highlights for each area. The full sustainability report can be found in attachment B. So under the planning category, staff updated the strategic zoning bylaw to now include beekeeping in urban areas, EV charging requirements mentioned, and reduced parking minimums. Staff also completed the Agri-Fresh plan that supports, promotes, and protects agriculture. Under buildings and lightings, we've adopted the green buildings policy, which was mentioned earlier, and completed the MCA roof replacement with increased insulation. For parks and open spaces, the city completed the urban forestry strategy, which envisions a vibrant urban forest for the city. We've also maintained over 13,500 standalone or specimen trees that contribute almost $855,000 in ecosystem services and benefits. Moving on to solid waste, the city developed a comprehensive contamination reduction plan with a communications campaign, curbside audits, and a new onboard truck technology. And also initiated planning for new solid waste ambassador positions to provide outreach to the community. The transportation category highlights include the installation of 13 new city EV charging stations, and planning has been completed for a 2-kilometer bikeway connecting the University of the Fraser Valley to the downtown transit exchange. And finally, under water and wastewater, the city continued the AMI program with new drop-in meters and new water meter connections installed. And finally, continued the partnership with the Green Bricks Education Society to deliver sustainability and education programming. So just in closing, the city continues to advance climate action successfully through forward-thinking leadership decisions, responsible investments, cross-departmental collaboration, and community stakeholder support. Both the sustainability report and the LGCAP survey celebrate these advancements and communicate to the community and other levels of government the strong commitment the city has in pursuing climate action. And with that, I will say thank you.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Thank you for the report. Any questions? Sure.
That's very broad.
Absolutely.
Yeah. With the individual targets that are established that we're working towards, how are they arrived? Like how, if it's 10% or 20%, or is that something that's based on outside of the city?
Right. So through the chair, it's a great question how we choose those targets and goals. At the time when the OCP was established in 2016, the prevailing climate science at the time gave us per capita and some targets to aim for. As you well know, climate impacts have certainly been ramping up over time. So at that time, those were based on best practice and followed along with various levels of government and the targets they were setting at that point.
Yeah. Then we have some things like you mentioned the EVs in here, and
Right.
how that's ramped up on a whole curve that nobody, well, I guess I didn't expect.
Adoption, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Ted, I believe you had a question online?
Yep, thank you. So I'm just wondering about what recommendations might exist for incentives, specifically with regard to buildings. Certainly, one way to reduce the carbon footprint is to reuse and adapt existing buildings, and I wonder how this report might address that.
Through the chair, it's a great question, and obviously we know that buildings are a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and use a lot of energy. So the topic of how to decarbonize and do that effectively financially and on a pragmatic level for the entire community and the city is a big one. The city does work collaboratively and follows along with the leadership from the other levels of government in terms of incentives that are available and how to structure those programs. And we continue to work with those various levels of government to promote the incentive programs that are available and look at opportunities to leverage those.
Great, thank you, Ted. Thanks for the question. Mark, did I see your hand up or? I guess not. No? Okay, that's fine. Perfect. Any other questions online or in person? Okay, great. There's no recommendation. So thank you so much for your report.
Great, thank you so much.
Great. So we will have no other business. Is anybody prepared to make a motion for adjournment? Perfect. Rob, thank you. Second, Ken. All those in favor? Opposed of any? Kevin, you opposed that?
Nope. Just slow.
Great. Motion to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned. Next meeting is November 23rd online. Mark, Ted, Ron, thank you. And in person, Ken, Rob, Kevin, thank you guys for your time. We'll see you in November.
Take care. Thank you.